Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Money is getting tight. I'm reading that the state of Ireland is actually scavenging the seafloor looking for copper left by the telecommunications industry to sell for scrap. They're drudging their own seabed for scrap copper. That's how bad it is in Ireland and around the world. Let's get all the updates from Stacy Herbert.
Max, actually, you know, that story reminds me of the 70s when inflation was raging and money was tight and oil in particular was out of control in price. But the 70s also reminds me of Times Square when you had a lot of hustlers there shaking you down.
I still have my leisure suit.
Or leisure suit, as much of the world calls them. So the first headline, though, reminds me of these Times Square's hustlers. Congressman pulls support for Libya rebels. U.S. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, a strong supporter of the Libyan people's uprising, announced his withdrawal of support for them because the revolutionaries were not agreeing to repay U.S. for the expenses in helping them attain freedom. Like I said, he's a hustler, right? He's like one of these con men that throw a ring, a gold ring in front of you walking through the streets of Paris. And they say, here, I found this wonderful ring. Here, have it. You take it. And oh, by the way, their thugs chase you down and try to shake you down for some money for it. He says the United States right now is going broke. We are spending $1.5 trillion every year for the last 3 years, more than what we are taking in. This means that we are on the edge of a major economic crisis now, and it's not right for us to borrow money from China or anywhere to give it to the people of Libya to help them when they want freedom.
Well, this is, again, is building to a crescendo of insanity. Every time they open their mouths, they're just adding to a case that can be made for what I call the American suicide cult. People actually drinking the cyanide of debt-financed foreign excursions.
His own argument, the Libyan rebels could say to him, well, stop fighting wars all over the place and maybe you won't go broke. He sounds like Louis XV. You know, he financed the American Revolution, and what happened? His head got chopped off because the nation went broke.
What are the economics here? In other words, the point, supposedly, is that you free the people and it creates a bump in global GDP, and the U.S. benefits through this down the road at some point. It's not that the U.S. is just renting its psychopathic, sadistic, armed militia and mercenaries for a few days, and now they want to get paid. Is Blackwater just a pay for assassination squad? And now they're saying that, oh, you didn't pay us the money we rented out our assassins to go cause mayhem in your country. You owe us money? Or is there, I thought this was some political angle to it.
No, it's a collapse of an empire, and this is how Rome fell apart. And I actually want to show you this little video to introduce you to Dana Rohrabacher so you know who he is. This is him performing a song that he wrote and is singing.
God bless our freedom, and God bless the people who work every day. God bless the folks who built this great country. God bless our rights.
So the song is called God Bless Us All, and if you look at that little plaque, let's look at a close-up of the plaque there. Yeah. Here he's saying that he was shot at by Russians while he was with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. So of course, he was behind that as well, of financing the rebels of Afghanistan, who then became Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, who then America went and has spent, what, $1 trillion in Afghanistan. So this guy is like, he's a racket. He's a Times Square racket.
What's his name?
Dana Rohrabacher.
Rohrabacher? He's the guy who planned 9/11?
So this congressman then went from Libya, where he failed to shake down the population, and he went to Iraq. Iraq asks U.S. congressmen to leave over repay remark. Yes, Congressman Rohrabacher showed up in Iraq and said, once Iraq becomes a very rich and prosperous country, we would hope that some consideration be given to repaying the United States some of the mega dollars that we have spent here in the last 8 years.
The United States imports oil to make its economy go forward. And the point of all this meddling is to try to keep the price of oil down so that the U.S. has a functioning economy. That's the point of the wars. It's not about renting out assassins for a few quick bucks to help your re-election campaign. This guy is not only is he a horrible musician, and not only does he look like Elmer Fudd on crack, but he's a dunderhead who doesn't even, somebody should give him, economics 101, and he should sit down over the weekend and learn how, 2 plus 2, what that equals. Because he's obviously either A, incredibly stupid, B, on drugs, C, he's a front man for Al-Qaeda, obviously, if he was responsible for the 9/11 attacks, and D, all the above.
This is the way the American empire operates their foreign colonies. Remember, Rome and Britain left behind vast, infrastructure projects. America just goes in, blows apart their infrastructure projects, and then shakes them down to make them pay the United States to rebuild it.
Well, how come the same logic is not applied to Israel? I mean, we've dumped hundreds of billions, $100 billion into Israel. We haven't seen a penny back. Haven't seen a penny back. Now, I happen to be a U.S. taxpayer. That means that whoever's up there now, Benjamin Netanyahu, he personally, in the state of Israel, owes me $5,000 or $6,000 back. Where's my freaking money?
So the Iraqis are also asking for their money back. Iraqis, we won't repay U.S. So the head of Iraqi Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee called Rohrabacher's comments stupid and said, quote, "This provokes us and the Iraqi people as well to demand compensations for losses Iraq suffered during the invasion." Again, the United States chose this war. It wasn't a war of necessity to go into Iraq. They chose to spend $3 trillion, and now they're trying to charge these people. They've killed 1 million Iraqis, destroyed their entire culture, looted the museums, and trashed all the architectural sites, and now they're demanding money.
Is this the same Rohrabacher who sells popcorn on TV?
I don't
Orville
know.
Rohrabacher?
So, again, he's had no luck shaking down the Iraqis or the Libyans, but we're having a lot of luck shaking down our allies in the West. U.S. foresees $46 million in 2011 military sales. So the United States plans to export $46.1 billion in weapons this year, which is double what they exported in 2010. Now, part of the reason is that all of these NATO bombing campaigns, well, it's apparently depleting the weapons ammunition and the resources of all their allies. So the allies have to come to the United States to replenish their stocks, which is a good racket for the U.S.
You sell them the razor, and they buy the blades. You sell them the razor at a loss, but you make it up when you sell them the blades. The U.S. gives NATO all this stuff to bomb people with. They run out of bombs, they're going to buy more bombs. It's a brilliant story. It's a brilliant business, if you're a genocidal maniac.
And then another headline along this racket, the Times Square racket of shaking down people around the world, how this pathetic empire is collapsing. In a pure coincidence, Gaddafi impeded U.S. oil interests before the war. So this is Glenn Greenwald, and he's talking about WikiLeaks documents which show that post the opening of Libya, thanks to J.P. Morgan executive Tony Blair, going there and meeting with Gaddafi with the Farting Camels of Tripoli.
Farting Camels of Tripoli. That's the name of my new punk rock band.
By the time Secretary of Rice Condoleezza Rice visited in 2008, U.S. joint ventures accounted for 510,000 of Libya's 1.7 million barrels a day production, a State Department cable shows. But all was not well. By November 2007, a State Department cable noted growing evidence of Libyan resource nationalism. Oil companies from America were actually even starting to withdraw because they didn't want to share as much as what Gaddafi was demanding, and Gaddafi was giving nationalistic speeches saying all these foreigners are taking our oil and making a lot of money, and we need more for the Libyan people.
Well, yeah, I mean, the oil, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending if you live on planet Earth, is running out as part of a thing called peak oil. And of course, whereas Orville Rohrabacher, the congressman who likes to help the Al-Qaeda folks, say about that?
Well, one nation not being invaded is Saudi Arabia. Saudi's ready to pump oil after OPEC collapse.
That's false, because they don't have the oil to pump.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Gawar is in rapid decline. Tell the truth, you Saudi nincompoop liars.
But that's not what matters, Max. All that matters is that they show their compliance, because remember, this is a U.S. empire built on an addiction to oil and easy oil, and all they need to tell the population of America is that they will continue providing them with cheap oil. As one oil analyst in this article notes, Saudi Arabia wants everyone to understand that they are serious. It's important that the Saudis are signaling that they are offering additional barrels.
It's important for everyone to understand that the Saudis are lying. They don't have the additional barrels of oil to pump. Ghawar field, like Cantarell in Bergen in Kuwait, is in rapid decline. The 85 million barrels that was pulled out of the ground recently during a recent year, well, the top, the historic top, it'll never be at that level again because it's a finite resource. What is it about the word finite that you don't understand, you frickin' Saudis?
Well, listen, we have a finite show here. I've got this really important story to end with, so I want to move on to that. So U.S. underwrites internet detour around censors. So this is another thing. The U.S. taxpayer built DARPA, i.e. the internet, is being offered to dissidents in the Middle East, select dissidents anyway, certainly not the Saudi Arabian dissidents or the Bahraini dissidents. They won't be given this shadow internet system for which they can communicate and blog. Now I want to say, what about, since we, the taxpayer, are paying for this shadow internet system for them, what about the Middle Eastern people giving some quid pro quo here? How about giving us a shadow Jefferson Memorial? Because Americans, we are not allowed to go dance there. So why not the Middle East people give us a shadow Jefferson Memorial at which we can go dance around?
You want a shadow Jefferson Memorial built somewhere in the Saudi Peninsula for us to dance as Americans?
Well, because as American Adam Kokesh right here on RT went to dance in front of the Jefferson Memorial, and he was beaten and repressed by the police, and the Obama administration is deploying a shadow internet system and mobile phone systems that dissidents can use to undermine repressive governments.
Yeah, and what better to dance to than disco, another genius invention of the 1970s. Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away. Much more coming your way, so stay right there. Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to go to New York City and talk with Saifedean Ammous, a visiting scholar at the Center on Capitalism and Society at Columbia University and a professor of economics at Lebanese American University. Saif, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thank you for having me, Max.
All right. Saif, you recently wrote a piece for the Financial Times called Too Much Aid Will Hobble the Arab Spring. First, tell us what are the economic issues behind the Arab Spring, and then whether this Western aid and debt will address any of these economic issues.
A lot of these problems were economic. It wasn't exclusively economic, but a lot of it was economic. And the real economic problems, I feel, are the government control over the various sectors of the economy, which was something that was strengthened over the past couple of decades through international institutions' supervision of privatization programs, which ended up strengthening the hand of the Mubarak and Ben Ali regimes in those countries and allowing them and their cronies to control more and more of the economic activity of the country, and which enriched them while at the same time denying a lot of economic opportunities for everybody else in society. I think this was the thing that the people of those countries revolted against, and if you look at the slogans and if you look at what the revolutionaries were saying on the street, it had a lot to do with this. It had a lot to do with the corrupt people that surrounded the regime that controlled all of the economic activity that went on. Now, after those regimes are toppled, it's very unfortunate, I feel, that we're seeing a repeat of all the same economic policies and all the same economic mistakes that led to this situation in the first place. And most markedly, I think the biggest problem right now is the emergence of the same international financial institutions that had been bankrolling the Mubarak and Ben Ali regimes are now re-emerging to bankroll the new emerging Tunisia and new emerging Egypt with a lot of money and a lot of debt and a lot of central plans hatched up in Washington for giant economic projects that will supposedly bring about economic transformation in these countries. I'm very skeptical of that happening, and I think that it's more likely that we're going to see a repeat of the same structural problems that these sort of initiatives have created in those countries previously and will continue to create for a while.
Now, the revolution in Cairo is pretty sophisticated, and the people on the ground seem to be following the minutiae of this pretty closely. What about the idea of a re-revolution? Just keep revolting again and again until they get it right?
No, absolutely. I think the majority of people in Egypt are under no illusions that their revolution is over. I think this is what most people in Egypt and Tunisia continue to say. They've removed the head of the regime, they've removed the president, they've removed a lot of the people that surround them, but they by no means feel that their revolution is over. And I think that's a very true and important thing for them to continue to believe. And in fact, a lot of people had dismissed the revolution after Mubarak was removed, and people said, well, the ruling establishment that is around Mubarak is going to continue, and Mubarak is going to continue to run the show from behind the scenes. But the Egyptians continue to go down into the streets, and they continue to protest, and they continue to demand more be done. And they succeeded in getting Mubarak tried. They succeeded in getting more and more people removed from office. They succeeded in getting more parts of the old regime removed. So it's still continuing. It's still continuing right now as we speak. The Egyptian and Tunisian people are doing their best to get rid of these old regimes.
Okay, you mentioned the IMF, who was active before the revolution. Now they're active again, as you describe it. It's just more of the same, and that the Egyptian people need to, and are very much aware of this. Now, the IMF just loaned $3 billion to Egypt. That's the latest deal. Are they also lending money to Tunisia? Who is in power actually to receive these loans?
The IMF, the World Bank, the group of the G8, and a lot of other international institutions are lending and granting all sorts of money. The US government and various other European governments, they're all engaged in this game of giving more aid and more debt at this point. But the very interesting question you ask is, who is in charge? And actually, I don't think anybody knows how to answer that question exactly in either Egypt or Tunisia, because I don't think anybody is really in charge of the country at this point. Under the previous regime, it was clear who was in charge. It was Mubarak in Egypt and Ben Ali in Tunisia. And, he was the person where, the buck stopped. Everything had to go through him or through somebody that he had delegated. So it's not really clear who is in charge of the country, and I don't think there is anybody in charge. What I think is happening is that you have various different groups that are competing for turf, competing for funding, competing for money and influence and power in the new Tunisia and in the new Egypt. And I think what we're seeing now is that among these various groups, one of the groups that has been at the forefront of this new Egyptian and Tunisian attempt to get back into the international financial institutions lending and borrowing schemes, basically, is an elite of the better educated, Western oriented economists and politicians who were friendly with the previous regime, who were part of the previous regime, but more of the technocratic side of the regime. Those people right now are continuing to basically with this to do the same sort of projects that they used to do under the Mubarak regime. They think that getting more funding from the IMF, from the World Bank, from USAID, from the British government is going to solve the problems of Egypt and Tunisia. They don't seem to realize that they were there, they were getting this same funding, and they were spending this same sort of money 2-3 years ago when people were getting ready to revolt against this regime. They have not gotten the message that they are part of the problem and not part of the solution. The majority of the Egyptian and Tunisian people clearly feel that these loans and what comes with them is a big part of the problem that these countries face, because this money has not led to economic development, it has not led to economic growth, it has led to a growing gap between rich and poor, it has led to a growing amount of economic power concentrated in the hands of a few people. And it has led to political corruption. I think this is the main and most problematic impact that this aid has, which is that it allows the people in charge to be unaccountable to their people, because they can just be accountable to their foreign donors, to their foreign funders. They get the money from the funders. The money is very large. It allows them to build their own security apparatus. It allows them to suppress any dissent. They don't need to cater to the needs of their people. They can just answer to their foreign funders. And I think this is the typification of this is the best way to understand the Ben Ali and the Mubarak regime that the people revolted against. And sadly, this is what we're seeing today being repeated. We're seeing that the international community, the World Bank, the IMF, they're basically trying to recreate new Ben Ali and new Mubaraks. I don't think they're doing this willingly in as much as they're doing it as a matter of institutional habit. They have to dispense loans because they believe their loans will solve the problems of this country. And they think whoever gets those loans is going to spend them like an honest technocrat would. But they're completely oblivious to reality, which, you know, if they would look at their own track record, they'd get a much better idea about the actual impact that this sort of project is going to have.
Let's talk economics for a second. The cause of the revolution, in part, was the skyrocketing cost of wheat. Now, when you throw a lot more money into the mix, coming in through IMF aid, let's call it, you're actually exacerbating that trend, and you're going to cause the price of wheat and other commodities to continue to go higher, which is only going to inflame tensions on the street. So there's a basic economic disconnect for those offering these loans and the effect that they have on the price of wheat and how that price is creating the revolution. Is it the IMF or just simply incapable of basic arithmetic, or are they just all political hacks looking to get some kind of free ride on the back of an impoverished Egyptian population?
Excellent question, Max, but I don't think I could psychoanalyze IMF loan officers and economists to be able to analyze it. But no, you're absolutely correct in that this idea of spending a lot of money doesn't make sense to treat a problem of inflation. It's the basic economics tells us that that's nonsense. Unfortunately, not a lot of people around the IMF and the World Bank.
But the psychology is clear. President Bush and Obama have said that the U.S. is addicted to oil. So how can they possibly act as a broker in the region when they are pathologically unable to do so?
The cause of the rise in prices of wheat and basic staples obviously was not an Egyptian or Tunisian exclusive issue. The reason for the price rises is global, and I personally believe that it has to do with the inflationary monetary policy of the U.S. Federal Reserve. But the local policies that those governments took against these price rises also exacerbated it. So in Egypt and in Tunisia, they tried to impose price controls. They tried to impose they tried to put subsidies. This is before the regimes fell. This is during the rule of Mubarak and Ben Ali. The government did all these very wrong IMF prescriptions, like subsidizing food and you know, it didn't work. It only exacerbated the problem because basic economic common sense tells us that it doesn't work. And they're going to continue doing the same thing now. We noticed that in Tunisia, one of the big funding plans that they applied for funding from the G8 for $25 billion, and their first item for which they wanted to spend money on was massive food and basic staples subsidy. But this, again, completely ignores the point of what the real problem was behind the revolution. It was not that people wanted more food, it was that they felt that they were being denied the chance to get to work on their own, to make their own food, to build their own economic future.
On the economic future front, can it diversify across different industries to give themselves more of a heterogeneous economy, or are they wed to commodities and oil and therefore subject to being captured by the oil industry?
There's no reason why the Egyptian economy could not diversify and could not grow very impressively. I think Egypt has massive potential. I think the problem always has been and always will be state control of economic sectors. This was a problem under the Mubarak regime, this was a problem before Mubarak came into power, and this is a problem after Mubarak left. But although I'm sort of optimistic that some of these institutional factors are being removed, but there's no question that when you have the government in charge of all the major industries, then it is the government that decides who can enter, who can exit the market. This puts a major impediment in front of industries evolving, in front of the most successful succeeding, and in front of the failed businesses going out of business and freeing up capital and labor for other productive businesses. There's been a very systematic structural failure within the way that the Egyptian government has handled this economy for the past 20-30 years, in no small part thanks to the measures implemented by the World Bank and the IMF. And so if the new Egypt and the new Tunisia managed to shake off World Bank and IMF conditionality and managed to get out of this, of the claw of the debt and of this vicious cycle of taking on more debt and then having to implement more policies imposed upon you by those institutions, if you can break out of it, and if they can liberalize their economy, and if they can let individuals and entrepreneurs have the freedom to do what they want, and if they can liberalize even the basic labor market, which is, I think, the most important thing at this point, so that normal young people could just go and have normal jobs without having to ask for licenses from politically connected people, I think there is massive potential for both the Egyptian and the Tunisian economy. However, if they continue down the road of central planning under the aegis of the IMF and the World Bank, if they continue to take loans, I think the future is bleak. We're going to continue to see more and more of the same. A few people at the top continue to enrich themselves and make more money, whereas the majority of the people find it impossible to make a living.
All right, Saifedean Ammous, the visiting scholar, the Center of Capitalism and Society at Columbia University and professor of economics at Lebanese American University. Thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. And I want to thank my guest, Saifedean Ammous. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.